Good morning, YouTubers. Today is the day I start the kitchen table project. The one that I'm kind of looking forward to because I'm doing something entirely different, and one I'm kind of a little nervous about because I've never worked with resin. So my goal is to try to fix this kitchen table because it has a huge burn in it, and so I'm going to use resin, and we'll give you a breakdown a little bit later. But basically what I'm going to do is I've cut out a template that I'm going to use as a guide for my router. I'm going to route out the area that was burnt. I'm going to use the template, which is something everybody recognizes, especially in my family, and the family I married into, because everyone is Irish. So that gives you a little hint what the item might be. But other than that, so once I route out the space, then I'm going to take some of the resin and coat the bottom of, or actually the cutout area, to reduce. So I want to coat it with resin to start off with, and let that dry. So that reduces the amount of bubbles. So some of the problems I'm anticipating is that I don't want to have, when I'm using the router, I don't want to have chip out on my table. So I'm going to probably use a razor blade, and I'll go through that when we get started, to outline, to use the template as an outline, and to use a razor blade to score the top of the table. So hopefully we'll reduce the chances of a chip out. The other thing I'm worried about is bubbles, which we hopefully with a thin coat of resin and let that dry before you pour in the main resin. Hopefully that will reduce the bubbles. And the other thing is that I don't want to overflow. So I've got some Tyvek tape that I've used before that resin doesn't stick to, and I'm going to use that to cover the table, so the resin only goes in the areas that I've routed out and not onto the table. Once that's finished and everything's set up, dried after about 48 hours, then I can come back and I can work on the rest of the table. I don't want to try to get all the dents and bruises out because that's character, and I heard that character is really good. In fact, I was told I had character, or maybe I was told I was a character. Either way, this should be a great project, and I'm looking forward to it. And we'll get inside and get set up, and I'll be right back with you. So there is the kitchen table, and as you can see from this distance, you can see the burn mark, and as we get closer, you can see where it's a pretty significant burn. It's actually very deep. Come on, focus. It's actually very deep. So at one time I wanted to try to maybe replace it with another piece of wood, but I'd have to cut out some kind of form, and then you'd have to worry about the gaps between the piece of wood I'm putting in and the existing table. And so that's the reason why I came up with the idea of resin. And as you can tell, right in front here is the template. And for those people that don't know, that's a shamrock. And I'm definitely going to need the look of the Irish when I do this project. But some of the tools I'll be using is, of course, the router. The router's got a bit with a guide on the top, so that will sit on top of the template, and the template will keep it above, for at least for the outside of the shamrock, and hopefully that will work. And of course, various tapes. I'm going to use 2 tapes to hold down. I'm going to use double-sided tape and painter's tape, the outside of it, once I do the double-sided tape on the back side, and then of course the Tyvek once I get the shamrock. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is use double-sided tape to put this down permanently in the location that I want to use. We definitely don't want the pattern moving. All right. So I'm going to orientate this way because this faces the main part of the kitchen. And make sure that's where I want it to go. I think that's it. So firmly place that down. My next step is I want to use a Sharpie because right here in this corner, I'm going to have to use a chisel and a razor blade because and probably some of this area too, because my router will not cut that particular area. Everything else it should. So I want to mark this out. And the other reason why I'm doing this is I want to make sure that I use a razor blade all the way around. And I'm going to do that in time lapse because it's pretty painful. Okay, so it goes all the way around. And it's just about right now during this project that I finally realized that I did not have the luck of the Irish, and that leprechaun wasn't helping.
Not nice to make fun of a leprechaun.
Okay, let's review. I love that phrase. All right, so the first attempt was, I would have to say, a massive fail. And it was only a massive fail because I chose using Masonite as the template. The problem with Masonite was that the double-sided tape that I used wasn't secure, and the Masonite moved, and it was too thin. And so that was my major problem. So had to go back and rethink. And so now what I've done is I've cut the template out of plywood. I've hot glued the template to the table, and I've now also, one of the problems I had was the dust. I've now got the vacuum cleaner. So we're going to keep doing this until I get it right. If I get to the point where I feel like this router just isn't working, and I feel like I probably could have bought a wider base, probably would have been a better idea. But I'll just use a Forstner bit and whatever else I need in order to get this finished. So I'm going to try it again, and I'm going to go radio silent because between the router and the vacuum cleaner, you wouldn't be able to hear me anyway. So here we go.
It's like a family tree, part of you and part of me. And if we
the funk back.
Okay. Other than a couple of deep pockets here, I have got to where I'm good. I'm good. I was scared as hell, to be honest with you, and I think, but once I changed the template into plywood and I glued the template to the table versus the double-sided tape that I used with the other template. Those two things, plus the fact that I just had to manhandle that. It didn't sound right. I had to make sure that I was in complete control of the router when I was doing this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a small batch of the resin, and I'm going to coat all of these raw edges. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some tape up here to stop, make sure I don't get any resin on top of the table. And then I'm going to use a paintbrush and do some pouring, and I'm going to paint the resin, and I'm going to let that dry for 24 hours. So it may be another day before I get back on this. And then once that's dry, then the next step is to pour up the complete resin, and it's going to be green with a pearl. So I think it's going to look good. It looks better than the burn. I mean, the burn's gone. So, but this is probably 1/3 of the battle right now, and I'm glad I made it through. And I'll be back. Okay, I've got this first little batch of resin made up, and I'm going to start by pouring it in these holes because I want to get rid of these holes.
One eternity later.
The quote for this video is, "The smallest good deed is greater than the grandest intention." Or in other words, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. This was anonymous. After the resin is done, I started using the iron and a wet cloth to pull the grain up from the table from all the dents. Then I use some quadruple aught steel wool to lightly sand. And then finally I put on 3 coats of polyurethane. Table's done. So I end up putting 3 coats of polyurethane on it, 1 gloss, and then I put sanded in between each coat, and then I put 2 coats of satin finish. It gives it more of basically the same shine that it had when we first got it 20 plus years ago. So if you're ready, here we go.
Do you shiver with anticipation?
And here is the table, completely done. Again, we still have character. There's still gonna be, I've got one pretty big scratch in it. I think that's from some book pack, yeah. From when our son was in school. Or it could be just about anything, really. So again, satin coat. Now some of the dings did pop up a little bit, helped out a little bit, and I think it looks a lot better. So I guess we'll need to show you what my solution for the burn was. You ready? And there it is. It is, for those that aren't Irish, it is a shamrock. So it turned out pretty good. The multi-colors in it, it's a green pearl, so it has different colors. And actually, pretty proportionate to the table. Great conversation starter, but it definitely is a lot better than the burn. So that is my solution using resin and a shamrock shape. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and God bless.